Hello, everyone. I'm Vince Rocco in New York, so let's get right to what everyone is talking about. Today on the show, we are going to peel back the layers of the city that never sleeps, one story at a time. My guest today is someone who has lived the hustle, the heartbreak, and the high-stakes deals of Manhattan life and has finally put it all down on paper. Joseph Aquino is the author of the new book, Memoirs of a Watch Salesman, a raw, funny, and brutally honest account of his roller coaster ride through the last 5 decades here in New York City. From selling tabletop goods to watches on the sidewalks in the 1970s to living among punk legends and street hustlers at the George Washington Hotel to becoming a major force in luxury real estate alongside the late Faith Hope Consolo, Joe has seen it all, he survived it all, and now he's telling it all. In this conversation, we will unpack what it means to hustle in New York City, how betrayal can shape a career, and why resilience is sometimes your only currency. We'll hear about icons in New York City at that time, jaw-dropping moments in real estate history, and behind-the-scenes look at the people, the power, and politics of a billion-dollar industry. So whether you're in sales, real estate, or just love a story of grit and reinvention, buckle up because Memoirs of a Watch Salesman isn't just Joe's story. It's a love letter to a city that builds you up, tears you down, and dares you to keep going. So let's jump right into it today. And with me on set today is Joe Aquino, the author of the book and founder of JCRES, a commercial real estate firm. And he joins me now to discuss. But first, let me welcome my listeners and viewers from across the United States and all around the globe. This is Talking New York Real Estate. So let's go behind the headlines and inside real estate, the state of our industry.
Hey, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. As an official moving partner of Brown Harris Stevens, we know that your clients deserve more than just a move. At Roadway Moving and Storage, we turn moving into an experience they will love. From specialized services to a white glove treatment, we've got it all covered. When you choose Roadway, you're choosing a peace of mind for your clients. Plus, our referral program is the most rewarding in the industry. Want to learn more? Shoot me an email at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
I'm Brian Scott Cohen, one of the top loan originators in the country and the #1 mortgage originator at Guaranteed Rate Infinity. Guaranteed Rate Infinity arguably has the most advanced tech in the industry. Our completely digital loan process makes it easy and efficient for homeowners, from a 15-minute pre-approval to the digital application and through closing. My team and I would love to help you get into the home of your dreams.
Okay, everybody, we have a really fascinating hour today. This conversation is going to be filled with information. My friend Joe here, the author, as I said at the top of the show, Memoirs of a Watch Salesman. And people say, how is that a real estate story? Well, trust me, we're going to get into it, okay? And Joe has plenty of stuff to say today. So welcome, Joe. Thank you for coming.
All right, thanks.
I want to really start at the beginning, okay? So your book is gritty, it's funny, it's heartbreaking, it's deeply human. The title must mean something to you, which you'll explain. But what inspired you to write this book?
Okay.
I mean, you spent 50 years in this wonderful city of ours. You got to this point. You wrote this book. It's hilarious. It's serious. It's a whole bunch of things. I read it twice.
Right.
I loved it.
Yes. Well, during COVID, I got vertigo. And, a guy like me just can't stay in an apartment for 3 or 4 weeks to watch the paint dry. And all of a sudden, I started getting all these visions. And the only thing I was able to do was type. I got to see the laptop clearly. And I just couldn't sit around 10, 12, 14 hours waiting for my wife to get home. So one day I started typing. In junior high school, they taught you how to type with 10 fingers. And back then I said, why are they teaching me how to type? I'm never going to be a secretary. But sure enough, I'm like typing, and I typed 3,000 words that day. And I typed the very beginning of my life. And then I just, every day, well, first of all, I didn't tell the wife I was writing this book. So every day during the daytime while she was at work, I'd be typing. And before you know it, in 6 weeks, I had a book, okay? I mean, it wasn't edited, but I had a book.
I can tell you because I'm in the middle of, in the process of writing a book myself. I'm not even going to say I'm in the middle of it yet. It's not easy. It takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of determination. It takes a lot of words, putting it all, in some semblance of an order. How do you do that? You said you started by saying you typed 3,000 words the first time sitting down at the start of your life. How does that all come together logically?
Well, first of all, it's a true story, and it's a nonfiction. And it's really easy when you're doing that, but you don't have to make up the characters. I was just surrounded by a lot of characters. And, like there was this one gentleman, his name was Peter, and I had to describe him. He was short, stubby, he never shaved, he was always sweating profusely, his hair was always slicked back. There was Ronnie, black African-American. He had a thin pencil mustache like Errol Flynn, always smoking Nat Sherman cigarettes. So you try to put people in the room and get a flavor of these people. For me, it was just easy. I just wrote what I saw.
But how do you remember the detail? I don't want to get into the weeds, but because I sit back sometimes and think the same thing about characters in my day, and it's like, how do you remember the details?
Well, it's very. I'm Sicilian, and Sicilians, we don't forget anything. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
okay. Take us back to the 1970s. I'm going to talk 1970s. Hold on. What was, you were selling knives on the street. You eventually got to selling watches on the street.
Right.
How did that all come about? What was that about? What did you think it was going to lead to?
Yeah, well, first of all, I got recruited on the streets of Brooklyn. I was a block away from the Junction. It was Mother's Day. I was selling these knife sets. And this junkie was looking to, he came to the table. He saw I had cash in my hand. Right away, I put my hand on the knife, and he backs up. And out of nowhere, these two guys come running out of the car. In fact, that guy, Peter and Ronnie. And they start talking to me like they're my old best friends. And before I know it, the junkie saw he was outnumbered, and he walked away. And all of a sudden, these guys start talking to me about this big operation in Manhattan. They do it on a grand scale. And back then, there was this Kismet scheme where you would invest 10 or 20,000 into merchandise that you couldn't sell. I said, look, I don't have any money. They said, no, we don't want your money. We want you. And sure enough, they recruited me, and they really got me to come the next day. I wanted to come on Monday. It was Friday. And I walked into this operation, and there was like 30 people, and there was all this merchandise, and they were putting it on vans, and there was a good vibe, and there were knife sets and glass sets and crock pot sets, and they were selling it on streets on the corner. And I just said, you know what? I think this feels good. And then sure enough, I went out the first day, and normally people would say it's 6-7 hours to maybe sell out. I sold out in an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I came back, and Peter said, what happened? Where's the merchandise? I said, no, I sold the merchandise. I just put out a big wad of cash. And he smiled. He said, I knew you had it in you, And, that's how it started,
The book says you lived at the George Washington Hotel. And for those who don't really remember, it was quite the place to be. But you were surrounded by artists, punks, prostitutes, and hustlers.
Yeah.
I mean, so at a very young age, which you were,
Yeah.
what was some of the lessons that you learned living in that environment, trying to understand who you were, find your way in New York City, and living among these people?
Right. The George Washington Hotel had a lot of senior citizens. On Friday, we were lined up, big line in front of the cashier. Back then no one's taking your check. There was no charge cards. We were paying $50 a week. You wait on a big line. You had to make sure you got a receipt, and you were good for the week. And but outside on the street corner, where especially at nighttime, there were pimps, prostitutes, and drug dealers, and people from all around the greater New York area used to come and visit my neighbors on a regular basis. And then you had some pretty interesting people lived in my building. You had Keith Haring, the famous artist. And then you had D.D. Ramone from the Ramones, the famous Ramones, because not far away was Max's Kansas City, where rock and roll and where punk really was invented. A couple of blocks away from there, you had the Chelsea Hotel, where Jimi Hendrix lived, where Janis Joplin lived, where Dylan lived. So it was this microcosm. It was this grittiness. But you know what? You would put your blinders on, but one day, one of our guys, our whole company was living in the George Washington Hotel, and he walked through Madison Square Park to get to our office on Fifth Avenue, and this is before they fixed up the park, and he comes in like at 9:15, he says, I can't believe it, I just got robbed. They took my gold chains off my neck. I said, Johnny... of course, why are you walking in the park? Why don't you walk around the park? It would have been safer,
But the older I get, I go back, I was telling somebody off camera before, the older I get, I go back to my favorite times as I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I can relate to the 70s. I can relate to the 80s. Lessons learned. How did it harden you in the 70s by living among these type of people, prostitutes and pimps and whatever else? What did it teach you that you took with you as you went forward and settled down into a career of real estate, which we'll get into later on?
Well, also you know who to trust and who not to. The owner of the company, Peter, we later found out that he was a former heroin addict that was now on methadone. On Saturdays when we used to give him the receivables, he used to take a double dose on the weekend. And when he used to count the money, he used to rock. And we used to take bets sometimes, like, when is he going to fall on his face? But, I learned back then that if I was going to touch methadone or heroin, I knew that if I just did it once, it would take me down. And so, there was a bunch of...
Those are life lessons. I did the
That
same
was a
thing.
life lesson. It's like, don't even go there. Don't even try it. You see what these people have a monkey on their back. I mean, that's the expression. It is a monkey on the back. They can't get rid of it. He always had to go to the methadone clinic. He was always sweating profusely. He was like a little Lou Costello, a short, stubby guy. But he was brilliant. He used to be an encyclopedia salesman, and he taught us how the art of selling. So the art of selling was...
Or better yet, the science of selling, as you quote. How did that shape you in those days to becoming even better at it later on in life?
So, to this day, I still walk into a meeting, whether it's Larry Silverstein, A.B. Rosen, whether I'm meeting the board at Cartier or Buccellati, like that 21-year-old kid, with a box of watches under my arms, getting ready to sell. You make your pitch, and then you got to shut up and listen. God gave you 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. Give the pitch, then shut up and listen. So it's a banter, and there's this, like I said, this art of selling that maybe we'll go into it. So
I've said for years there are many people who do many things in our world, all kinds of jobs, all kinds of professions, but not many people can become salespeople. Not many people can be really good at sales. I've been in sales my entire career. Right out of college. So for me, it comes easy. You learn how to read people, you learn how to read environments and scenes, and you go with it from there. Let's talk a little bit about the health club years that came after.
Right.
8 years managing health clubs during the fitness boom of the 80s. I mean, my first health club I joined in the 80s.
Right.
And it was like if you didn't join a health club, you were a square, as the young kids call you today. Laughable and full of lessons. Why?
Well, 2 years of doing door-to-door with the watches, I got burnt out. And there was really no future to that. But I remember people used to offer me jobs, and I was always loyal to Peter and Ronnie, and I always turned them down. But I remember, like, the people at the health club at Jack Lane would always offer me a job. So sure enough, I went to Flatbush Avenue, and they said, no, you got to go see Eileen Collins at the Biltmore Hotel on Madison Avenue. And I went, and unbeknownst to me, she was like a former Miss America contestant, beautiful lady, picture of health, the perfect person to be the face of Jack Lane. Now, you got to remember, back then, nobody worked out. Everybody was smoking. Everybody ate whatever they want. If you told people, you got to go jog for 2 hours, they would think you're nuts, So I went into this program. Yes, it was a salesperson's program, but unbeknownst to me, it really was a management program. They would call it a management program now. And first they taught you how to be a salesman, then assistant manager, then they throw the keys at you, and now you're running the club. And as you get better, you're running bigger clubs. So by the time I left 8 years later, I was running a 40,000 square foot club that was last on profitability. And in the last year, I brought it up to number 2 in profitability, and there was 40 locations in the tri-state area. So as far as the fun stuff, it was the go-go 80s.
What about unforgettable characters in those days? Because I remember I was a Jack LaLanne member in the 80s, and as you indicated before, I was a smoker in those days. I would work out. I'd walk out the door. The minute I walked out the glass front door, I lit up a cigarette and walked across the street to my office at IBM.
Yeah.
And I would think to myself, only once in a blue moon, why did you just do that? You just got out of a health club, and you're not supposed to be smoking anyway. But that was the thing. But what made these characters, and I call them characters, and I was one of them, in those days, unforgettable? Because if you look at people from the 80s and you look at people from today, I would use that term: different, unforgettable, etc.
Well, you had a lot of characters. First of all, you had Jack Lane. And once a year, he would do crazy things. He was in his probably 70s back then, and he'd be in a river, tugging 100 boats for, to celebrate his birthday. Then we had Don Wildman, who ran the company, and in his 60s, he was doing Ironmans. I mean, that's a 2.5 mile open water swim. It's a marathon run, and it's a 120-mile bike. I mean, like, insane. And it's done in Hawaii in heat, And one time we had this consortium, and they did a tin can triathlon, which was a quarter-mile swim, and a 25-mile bike and a 6-mile run. And me and two other guys said, all right, last minute, we're going to do it. And if you finished the race, they gave you the bike, they would ship the bike home to you. And then Harry Schwartz, the owner, came over to us the night before at the dinner table. He said, all right, I hear you 3 guys are going to do the race, He said, yeah, Harry, come on. He said, look, you can do the race, but don't embarrass me. You got to finish. And then, like, all this pressure came on me. I was, oh, Jesus, you're right. I got to finish. And sure enough, I did finish. I finished in last place. And I really felt bad.
That's a finish.
I really felt bad, but I found out that 20 people quit along the way, and that made me feel a lot better, So the next day he came over and said, so I heard you finished. I said, yeah, but Harry, it was last place. But he looked me dead in the eye. He goes, yes, but you finished.
Well, it's not unlike the marathon runners today, right? As long as they finish and get over the goal line, doesn't matter where they place. They finish the race. They did their, 20 miles. Before we go to break, though, just that chapter in life was interesting. Was a learning experience, growing experience. What did it teach you about leadership, sales, and people in general and after the break, we'll talk about real estate, but what did it teach you in those days?
Well, first of all, our mandated hours was 10 to 10, Monday through Friday. And all through my life, I never took the easy path. I went to aviation high school. I lived in Brooklyn. I took an hour train to Queens, Long Island City. It wasn't 5 periods a day. It was 10 periods. Then I took the hour train back. And the easy path is not always the best path. So 10 to 10, Monday through Friday. So yes, I worked 8 years, but if you count all those hours, I really worked 16 years, okay? And it's just, first you got to become good, and then you got to become consistent. And when you're working this many hours, and if you just apply the techniques that they teach you, on how to sell and how to manage. It wasn't just selling. We had to clean the club. We had to make sure Mr. and Mrs. Jones were getting serviced. We had to make sure that the people swimming in the pool, that the senior citizens were being watched over, not just the pretty girls. I used to have meetings once a month just to simply describe job description, just to remind everybody what their jobs were. It sounds silly, but I used to tell them everything that I promised people in the pitch, and don't make me a liar, And so it all comes together. So just hard work always pays off. And the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Well, not going to argue with that. All right, listen, we have to take a break. There's so much more after. We're going to get into Joe's climb in real estate and more, as Talking New York Real Estate is just getting underway on this Tuesday morning. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying...
I'm Brian Scott Cohen, one of the top loan originators in the country, and the #1 mortgage originator at Guaranteed Rate Infinity. Guaranteed Rate Infinity arguably has the most advanced tech in the industry. Our completely digital loan process makes it easy and efficient for homeowners, from a 15-minute pre-approval to the digital application and through closing. My team and I would love to help you get into the home of your dreams.
Okay, everybody, we are back with Joe. So, we touched a little bit about, and we'll still, get there, I'm sure, his background, his climb, his years on the street selling good stuff in the 1970s. But I want to talk a little bit, Joe, about, your climb in real estate. How did you make the leap from, watch salesman to health club manager and a super successful one to luxury real estate in this town where, as I said at the beginning, it eats you up and chews you out. Eats you up, chews you up, and spits you out, and it's very difficult to survive. So, where did it begin, and how did you make it successful?
At 29, I was working 10 to 10 Monday through Friday, and I wanted to get married and have a family. And, you really can't get married, have a family coming home at 11:30 at night. So altruistically, I said, maybe I should go into real estate. This is something that my family was into. Well, at this point, my parents, they both were deceased, but my father was a longshoreman. And like in 1950, he comes home in the month of August to a 7-course turkey dinner, and there's no air conditioning. And he's eating, and he knows my mother bought something. He thinks a dress or radio. And he goes, "All right, Annie, what did you buy?" And she goes, "Oh, Dad, I bought a 3-family house." And he spit the food out, And we can't afford that. And she said, no. And she sat him down and she showed him how if they rent upstairs and downstairs and they live on the second level, how they can live rent-free, an expression that used to be in existence. So sure enough, she pushed him into the deal. She raised $2,000 amongst the family. The townhouse back then in Brooklyn by Prospect Park, my mother knew how to pick property, was only $17,000. And over the course of the years, they owned 3 properties, and by the time at 29, they had long gone. The properties were long sold. So altruistically, I said I should go into real estate. So I knew I knew a lady, Gail Gray, that her husband was Joel Gray, the famous radio announcer, and she hooked me up with Gail Coverdale. We went out to dinner, and I told him, I want to go into real estate. I want to be a broker. And Gail explained all the various, residential, there's office, and . So I originally came in, and I did investment sales. So I did investment sales for 3 years. I sold a shopping center, 3 apartment buildings in Harlem. When Harlem started, people started buying land in Long Beach, and an enclosed shopping center in Salem, Massachusetts. But then after tax reform, property values got cut by 40%. Nothing was being traded. At that point, I had 17 charge cards, $50,000 in debt. I went bankrupt. I came back to Jack Elaine's, and you can never go back. And then there was about a 5-month period I wasn't working. We're talking about being knocked down, and coming back up. And all of a sudden, I answered an ad to be a canvasser at Garrick Oak Store Leasing. Now, normally, someone that's 21 out of college would take this job. I'm 31. I call up on a Wednesday, speak to Lee Stan, and he said, "It's Wednesday. The ad came out on Sunday. We hired this kid out of college on Monday. The job is taken." And I said, no, Mr. Stan, you really should meet me. I just told him everything of what I just sold, and I have this picture of the shopping. All right, you want to come in Friday? So later on, Lee said, when you came in, I wanted to bring you back into investment sales. And when I did the interview, I said, no, I don't want to do investment sales. I want to do retail. I said, I used to be a retailer. I said, and I worked with property owners. I know both sides of the equation. I'm going to be great. We hired this kid out of college. I said, look, Mr. Stan, this kid can get a job anywhere. Don't worry about that kid in college. You want to hire me? I have experience. So I sold him. He said, all right. I can't make that decision. He says, but, come back, call me on Tuesday, and I'll let you know.
Let me ask you something, because Your first foray into, I guess, knowledge of real estate was your mom buying a house in Brooklyn,
Right.
a 3-family house, residential.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when you step into it, initially, you step into the commercial side,
Right.
into the retail side. Was there a choice there, or is it just what you
Yeah,
found
right.
and ran with it? I mean, there's a huge difference between residential and commercial.
Right. Back then, I didn't do a deep dive. Well, first of all, there's no internet back then. So, I literally made a decision at that dinner table. And it just sounded, she started saying on the commercial side, you're going to work with developers and builders. And it just sounded more exciting, I didn't know there was this division of resi. But I have to tell you, though, when I was started and I had no money, on the weekends, I used to work at Gail Coverdale's residential office on 3rd Avenue and 95th Street, and I leased a lot of apartments in Normandy Court that the Milsteins,
Normandy Court,
I needed money, So there was a period where I was working 7 days a week, and that kind of burnt me out too. But once I went into commercial, it was commercial. And it was, and I had good training. You had to learn on the return on investment, and on building FAR, the floor area ratio, and so I had good training. And in there, it's more like picking the needle out of the haystack. You have to pick the good investment, and then you have to bring it to the buyer. So there's a lot of research that has to be done. But I did like renting apartments on a vacant apartment. If there was Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I used to get there early, see 5 or 6 apartments, and then back then we were doing ads in the New York Times, and at 1, 2, 3 o'clock we'd get busy, and I used to let them be in the apartment by themselves if I saw they liked it, and I said, look, I'll wait on the outside, and when you finish, just come out. And if they came out, if they were smiling, I knew I had a sale. If they weren't smiling, I was taking them to the next 2 or 3 apartments. So that was my real estate hustle. I got, it's all about service. You got to show people a lot of product and just simply give them what they want. Don't push anything on them. Don't start making opinions. Oh, I like this fireplace. Who cares you like this fireplace?
Well, it's not about us.
Yeah.
But, by the way, as you progressed through your career, you were involved in many landmark deals.
Yeah.
On Madison Avenue, 5th Avenue, even as far out west as Beverly Hills.
Right.
You also, and we'll talk about Faith Hope Consolo.
Right.
You work with the queen of retail for over 20 years.
It's 26 years. Yeah.
26 years. So tell us a little bit about what that partnership was about, how you grew into where you, eventually ended your career in retail and commercial, because any pro out there who's, been around this business for a long time, know who Faith is and understand the success that she brought to the table.
So
what was that partnership all about?
So that partnership was really unique. It was funny. When I was the canvasser, she came over to me, and she said, what's your name? I said, Joe Aquino. And she goes, you're Italian? I said, yeah. She says, these Jewish boys here, they're still fighting the 6-Day War. And she said it loud, and everybody was cracking up. It was a very funny joke. So she sat down, and she said, well, tell me about yourself. And I told her everything about everything I just told everybody. And she said, well, tell me about your parents. Well, your father was a longshoreman. He died when I was 13. My mother, 21, she passed away. She said, what, you want to hear about me now? I said, yeah. She said, well, my father died when I was 2. I'm like, it's like this arrow just pierced my heart. I knew my pain. She said, my mother died when I was 12. I'm like, the second arrow just pierced my heart. She says, and my grandmother who raised me, she died when I was 21. And I just felt so bad for her, And at that point, that's really when the partnership started. She started handing me notes, do this, do that. Weeks later, she said, when people used to other canvases, when I gave them notes, she said maybe 3 or 4 days they'd come back. Sometimes they'd never come back. She said, you'd come back in like 10, 15 minutes. I said, well, Faith, I was doing this for 3 years. I know the owner's book. I know the turf. I know the drill. So, Faith was a Leo. My mother was a Leo. They were born a day apart. So I always used to joke with her. I said, the training my mother gave me set me up to work with you. But if you know anything about astrology, the Leos are, it's all about the Leos. They're the sun, and the whole world revolves around them.
But what made her the icon that she clearly was throughout, the queen of retail?
Right.
What made her, the success she found and,
Right.
and the type of person she was? Because again,
Yeah.
household name in retail, commercial real estate for many, many years until she passed away.
Right. She knew what luxury was. The word luxury today is over.
Well, it's got a lot of different meanings.
Yeah, it's overused. But she really did know what luxury was. Ever since as a young girl, she traveled worldwide travel. She knew the brands. She was an incredible reader. She would maybe read 20 magazines a week. Every newspaper. I mean, she really was very, very knowledgeable. And she just knew the brands. Early on, it was Garrick Org Associates Store Leasing, but then Charlie Org made Garrick Org Worldwide. And she was smart. We were the first ones to have an office in Paris. And she had a staff that she had a Parisian girl. She had a girl from Italy. We had a guy from England. We should have had a guy from Spain, but he wasn't really from Spain, and he wasn't really respected when he went out there. But she did the first Zara. Zara. Zara did a 15,000 square foot deal. Nobody was doing big deals back then. She did Matsuda. She did Alain Mickley, the French eyewear company. She did Paul Smith. I mean, these brands there was there was only Gucci on Fifth Avenue. That was it for luxury. Then we were at the very beginning of the cusp of bringing these European brands into the United States.
What did you learn from those days? I
What did I learn? I learned that I had to have a good time. I was having that was great, and I was traveling all over the place. No, you learn. You learn. The joke is that the Italians have two of everything. The French scream throughout the whole deal. The Germans, if they say on Thursday there'll be 9 of us in a blue suit, white shirt, and yellow tie. We're going to sign a 350-page document. You can bet the ranch that they're doing it. There were these, you learn how to work with all these different countries, but you knew you had to service them. You really had to, and that was before CoStar. What was great about me, since I was a canvasser, is I would literally call every building to see if there was retail space available. That's one of the tools that I brought to Faith. One time I canvassed every single store and building on Madison, and I gave Faith this list, and you thought I was giving her a gold bar. She just couldn't believe, what I was willing to do. She one time on Fifth Avenue, she says, that Kimby Optics at 7-Eleven, they really don't belong here. Call up the owner. So I spoke to this guy, Anthony, at one of the big real estate companies, and I just hit him like, look, I know Kimby's available. They don't belong there. What's the deal? And he said, no. That's not the store that's available. What's available is the corner store. And I walked away. I said, Jesus, I got the corner now. And sure enough, we had a listing that nobody had, and we brought Goldfiled in from Germany, and they made pocketbooks, but they were the first ones to make pocketbooks in primary colors. The red, the blue, the yellow, and so early on, that work discipline I brought right into real estate. I wasn't sitting back waiting for it to come to me. I was coming to it.
So, Memoirs of a Watch Salesman, a New York City real estate story, starts out with you, as we discussed, selling watches on the street, etc., getting into real estate, growing with Faith Consolo, great partnership for 26 years. But, the book does get into, and you don't hold back when it comes to betrayal, lawsuits, loss. Why was it important for you to include those painful parts of your story in this book? and who was suing you and why? Because
Right.
all of these things, are not typical in New York City real estate,
Right,
quite
right.
frankly, whether it's commercial or residential. But a major part of your story, and I found, I said I read the book twice, but fascinating as I went through each of these moments because they're telling, they're important, and they really assist in telling your story.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that, and why did you not hold back on that?
Sure. So, when we had to leave Garrick, Charlie, we wound up finding out later Charlie was sick and he needed a heart transplant, and he died on the operating table. But prior to that, Charlie was trying to sell the company, and nobody was interested in buying because the companies, they feel if you implode, they'll pick up your real estate brokers for nothing. So sure enough, we went to all our competition, and when you go to your competition, you say you want a job. They're like, ha 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 ha, yeah, no way, So nobody was hiring us, and Esther Muller, who's a dear friend of Faith and also of mine, and she said, hey, Faith, we're all going to Rubenstein's 50th anniversary party in Central Park. She says, let me introduce you to Dottie Herman from Douglas Elliman. They just bought the company, and they're looking to really develop their commercial division. So sure enough, we went, and Dottie and Faith really hit it off. And so now at this point, even though we were partnership for 26 years, Faith decided to negotiate her deal with Dottie and Howard Lorber directly. Well, actually, I don't think Dottie was involved in the negotiations. So at this point, Howard Lorber he wasn't raised in real estate brokerage. He owned L'Oreal Tobacco, and he also owned Nathan's Famous, the hot dog retailer. And so Faith was always afraid of commitment. I mean, she said she was married to Jerry for 35 years, but they never really signed the paper. They lived together for 35 years. And so wind up, when she did her deal with Howard, she should have done a 5-year deal, but she did a 2-year deal where Douglas Elliman were paying for all the expenses, which is normally how the deal goes. And if anybody knows real estate broker, you make your split, whether it's the company keeps 30, you keep 70, and they pay for the expenses. I mean, one time when I was negotiating with Howard, he slipped and he said, oh, in residential, he says, I only make 10% off of the residential. Well, by the time all right, fine. So what happened for 2 years, we were doing really swell. The expenses were paid. We were doing the deals. We were getting paid 70%. I was getting my 35%. She was getting her 35%. Then in the 2 years and 1 day, Faith gets a letter, and it says, all right, the agreement's over. If you want to go forward, you have to pay the first $500,000 in expenses. So, $500,000 is a lot of money.
This is coming from Douglas Elliman?
Yeah, it's coming from Douglas Elliman. $500,000 is a lot of money in anyone's, a game. And imagine this, that was 20 years ago. So, that's like.
Well, maybe... where does the betrayal come? Is that the betrayal? Is that the lawsuit? Is that, the loss? And what was that loss?
Right. So that was big. So at that point, it's like, oh, I'm going to hire an attorney and I'm going to negotiate. Well, there was no negotiating with Howard. 4 weeks later, I owed $25,000 to my attorney, and Howard's a billionaire. He can outspend you on legal. So finally one day it's like, look, I told my attorney we're not negotiating anymore. Just tell them I'm not signing anything. And then what happened was they stopped paying us. And Howard would say, look, I'm not going to pay you. We got to get the agreement. And so they were using this force tactics where at this point, after a couple of months, 2, 3, I had a mortgage. I was living at the Manhattan house and, I needed money coming in. We were doing deals, but they weren't paying us. And my wife started losing her hair, and she started getting rosacea on her nose. And I kept writing emails, going unanswered emails. So finally I demanded a face-to-face meeting. Like, look, we got to get paid. We just can't do this. Now another thing, we kept on going back and talking to our competitors, but I think at this point it's like, yeah, I hear that they're doing well, but they're costly, So we were trapped, So I guess that is the betrayal,
All right, so we're going to come back right after these messages, talking New York real estate. We'll be right back. This is the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
When we first started Excel Real Property Management 11 years ago, we did so with the intention of protecting the investment community. Here at Excel Real Property Management, we focus specifically on serving the needs of individual apartments, townhouse, and small multifamily building owners both in Manhattan and select neighborhoods of Brooklyn. Our services encompass everything: rent collection, expense payment, handling maintenance and repair, turnover between tenants, insurance needs. Literally anything that an investor would typically handle him or herself, we take care of for them. Whether you hold one individual apartment or a rental building that houses 20 units, Excel is here to help with all of your specific needs.
Okay, we're back. So, in the book, you go into a lot of detail with your relationship with Howard Lorber, Douglas Elliman, and the many, many years that you worked there, both you and Faith. Take us through, briefly what that really meant or how it came to an end with you and Faith, because relationships end, careers, move on, etc.
Right.
How did any of that influence, whether it was the leadership at Elliman or the company itself, bring you guys to an end of your 26-year career?
So, at this point, we had a lot of staff. We had like 4 or 5 secretaries, admin. We had marketing. We had 2 publicists. We had legal fees. And, so everything was coming out of our commissions. I mean, it wasn't even like proportionate share. It wasn't like, oh, here's the dollar, and we'll take 30%, and you'll pay 7%. I mean, we were paying for everything, and I was coming home with 10%. And you live in Manhattan, you can't live on 10%. No. So this went on for about 10 years, 12 years, and finally, it's like one day I wake up, and I'm looking at the secretaries. I say, I'm paying her salary, I'm paying her vacation, I'm paying her medical. It's Douglas Elliman. I'm an independent contractor. I am who I am. This is unfair. So my 40th anniversary, I went to Midwood's High School's 40th anniversary. I saw Cindy Salvo, an old friend. She's an attorney, licensed in Jersey and New York. And I tell her my story. And I said, look, I don't think this is fair. I shouldn't be paying this money. And she rattled off some federal laws that she felt they were breaking. And she said, look, you really should, you consider suing. And, well, long story short, 3 or 4 weeks later, I tried to get Faith involved in the lawsuit. She wouldn't sue. And I served them papers where we were in federal court.
And what was that lawsuit based on?
It was based upon all these unauthorized expenses. I mean, I didn't sign the agreement. I've sent them hundreds of emails saying, this is unfair to be paying this. Went on deaf ears. We'd always get paid 6 months later with a reconciliation sheet. The reconciliation sheet had us paying rent. They were charging us rent. They were charging us a franchise fee. They were charging us just paper clips. It was just crazy. It was just pile on. I always felt that Howard, he charged us. This was the model that he wanted everyone, but he couldn't do it to the residential people, who 6,000 people would walk out overnight. But he did it to us. And You know,
So the relationship ends.
Yeah.
Your relationship with the company ends. Sadly, after working with Faith for so long, she passed away. And you explained in the book that you weren't even invited to her memorial. That had to be painful.
yeah, it was painful.
So how did you process that, and why weren't you invited to the memorial?
Well, 30 minutes after I Stephen James, we all know who Stephen James is, comes down and says, all right, Joe, you got to leave now. So what do you mean? He said, no, Joe, you can't stay here anymore. We were in federal court, and the magistrate jerked us around for a year, and then finally he convinced my attorney that we belonged in state court. And so when we refiled in Supreme Court, in state court, a week went by, and then they came down and they threw me out. They were fearful in federal court because we were doing all these labor charges. I mean, if I would have had my day in court, and if I would have won, it probably would have changed the way things were done in real estate. So it was a big push to get me in state court, and they weren't fearful in state court. In state court, it's like the Wild Wild West. They can jerk you around for years before you really see a trial. So 30 minutes after I left, this article came out in The Real Deal saying that the reason why I sued Douglas Elliman is that Faith took $1 million of my commission, which was an absolute lie. It was an absolute lie. And 33 minutes after that article came out, Faith sends me a text saying, we are no longer family. And it broke my heart because it was a total lie, that it was fabricated.
Well, clearly she didn't want to go above and beyond and get into the weeds with a lawsuit and make maybe bad feelings. Who knows? But yeah, it did affect you. But not being invited to her memorial, who made that decision?
Well,
was it her family?
I don't know, but it was persona non grata. In the industry, I was looked upon as a traitor now. Okay, and her friends turned their back on me. Customers turned their back on me. Like, how could you do this to Faith? Well, she was so good to you, So that's really why I just wasn't on the A list anymore, and I was looked as stabbing Faith in the back. I mean, that's clearly.
Let's get back to the book for a minute, because you said this book will make people laugh, they make them wince, make them cry.
Yeah.
But when people read this and they finish reading it, what do you want them to take away from that? I mean, I can tell you, I started up, Memoirs of a Watch Salesman, a New York City real estate story. It goes between you, it goes between real estate, it goes back and forth. Very interesting, very intriguing. But you do cry, you do sit back, and I know the industry, because I've been in it for a long time. What do you really want people to take away from this book after they finish reading it?
All right, look.
More about real estate, more about you, more about the beginnings of a life, getting into real estate. What is it you want them to know?
Sometimes you meet bad people,
Well, that happens.
And you can't help it. And sometimes, I basically lost everything. But, it's like that Frank Sinatra song. You got to, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and you have to keep on going. And, you got to you're going to get knocked down. You have to just assume it's going to happen, and you have to come back swinging. But you got to reinvent yourself all the time, and you have to pivot. It's like I pivoted from peddling to then.
Correct.
Then we went to selling door to door. Then I pivoted into memberships. Then I pivoted into investment sales. Then I pivoted into retail leasing. Now all of a sudden, one of the reasons why I started writing is that anytime you would put my name in the internet, all these horrible articles would come up from the real estate on The Real Deal. I mean, I had 30, 40 years of good stuff, and people the first thing they would read, I sued Faith, and it was horrible. So I started writing articles and to push these other bad articles down. If you have your new articles and you have your name, the fresh articles come out. I mean, even now, The Real Deal still manages where when you put my name in, it's one of the first things is I called up in Muir one time, the owner of The Real Deal, says, look, it was a lie. I forgive you guys. You didn't fact check, but you got to take it down. You're hurting me. No, Joe, it's not coming down. It's not coming down. We get a lot of Google hits, and our whole business is based on Google hits. Meanwhile, they tried to destroy me, so I had to reinvent myself, and so it's branding. We were the first ones to brand ourselves, by the way, but that's another story.
Well, your book is really all about reinventing and rebranding, but your writing is sharp, it's witty, it's unfiltered. I've known you for a while, but I was very, interested in how you write. Where does that voice come from? Was it the betrayal? Was it the starting early in life, selling watches on the street? Was it getting into commercial real estate and understanding the complexity of it all? Where does that voice come from? What propelled you to put it all in a book, again, in two parts? You growing up, you learning the streets of New York, and you becoming enormously successul in real estate.
Right.
But the way you write it, where is that voice coming from? What was your goal?
Right. It's like I said, I had vertigo. I was sick as a dog. I had to wear a bicycle helmet back then because I kept falling. I didn't want to crack my head. And, it's almost like if you believe in God, which I do, it's like God said, all right, you got vertigo. You're stuck in this apartment for 3 weeks. You can either twiddle your thumbs or be productive and write the book. Do it already, And, I just went, and it just started flowing. 8 hours, 10 hours, just sitting and being dizzy, but I was able to type, and I was able to see the clear screen. And I just went, and I knew I had a lot of funny stories. We didn't even go in. You didn't say, tell me one of the funny stories. But if you want to hear a funny story, you have to ask me that question. But the book is a hoot. It's a hoot, and it's a deep dive. The nice part about the book is I actually bring you into the room when I'm negotiating. We bring you into the room with Cartier, and when Faith went to Greece, and she's there with the board of the Onassis Foundation, and having dinner and with Cartier, and when we did the redevelopment of 42nd Street Times Square, and we closed 42nd Street down between 7th and 8th, and when we had to sue for the Toys R Us deal, 108,000 square foot deal, or we had to sue Abe Hirschfeld because we brought him the Reebok deal on 61st Street, and somehow the son said, why? The father said, the son never told me about the deal.
But you survived. Okay, and it's called resilience. So when you look at that word, you think about that word, you think about what it means. What does it mean to you now, after everything you've gone through, where you began, where you started, all these deals that you went through that were, in some cases good, some cases excruciating? What does that word mean to you today?
Yeah. Resilience is you can either, lock yourself up in a mental institution and call it a day, or look, I'm very talented, and I'm starting to realize some other talents I have in writing. And already I'm thinking about the part 2 on the book. But, it's pretty expensive to live in Manhattan, and you just can't have the luxury to do nothing. So every day, I just go out, but I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy selling. I enjoy getting from point A to point B. It's just who I am. And
so young people reading the book, young people watching this or listening to this, we have a great size audience. What advice would you give someone who's just starting out in sales or in real estate today? Again, based on your experience, based on how you started, where you came from, and where you've evolved. Again, super successful career.
Yeah, okay.
What experience would you give the youth?
First of all, you have to have business cards. I don't care about this electronic stuff. If somebody gave me an electronic card, in 3 or 4 days, I'm not going to remember you, okay? First of all, I have 65,000 contacts, okay? You're going to be one of 65,000. And if you're sitting at a restaurant, talk to the people to the left of you, talk to the people to the right of you. I was talking to the manager PJ Clark's in the financial district. My wife hates when I'm pitching, and she's kicking me on the side, and I keep moving over, and she keeps moving, and I'm pitching this lady, and then I get the lady's card. I find out who I'm going to deal with, the CEO in Washington D.C., and then she walks away, and I go, "Come on. What is wrong with you?" I said, I've been doing this with you like 25 years. I said, one of these deals can be a 6 or 7-digit commission. And she just stays quiet, But, you have to, if you're on the elevator, you got to be talking to people. You got to talk. You got to get cards.
Well, we learned that when I was a sales guy in training at IBM in the 80s. Your elevator pitch was everything. As you just said, you talk to people. You negotiate with people. You're selling people all the time, no matter where you are.
Right.
It is what it is. All right. So when you look back on everything you've been through, what are you most proud of? You've had a very big career. What are you most proud of?
Everyone take a look at me. I'm going to be 70 in October. Okay. So I'm playing tennis 3 or 4 times a week. I'm healthy as sin. But, I've taken care of myself. I stopped using the salt shaker since 1978.
Oh, never.
Yeah.
I'm not stopping that.
I just recently stopped drinking about 3 months ago.
I'm not stopping that either.
Yeah. So I had my eyes done, but I couldn't see. My eyelids were too low. But I got a wife that I live dearly. We go at it like two tigers most of the time. But, and now at 70, I'm saying, how many, do I have 20 more summers left? Do I have 30 more summers left? It's just enjoy the ride, work hard, enjoy the ride, try to be fair with everybody, pick your friends and and work hard. Look, I could have had an MBA and I could have been corporate, but I was corporate. I mean, when we were at Jack Lane's, it was Bally Fitness. We were doing $1 billion a year in sales back in the 80s. That was a huge number. So
a very big number in the 80s.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you just be creative. My wife always says that if I go first, she's going to put La Dolce Vita on my tombstone. I have 4 American passports. Every page is stamped. I've traveled Marrakesh, Singapore, but for business, Rome, Venice, Vienna, Sao Paulo, Mexico City. I'm chasing these tenants all around the world. You have to find your passion and then just do it and be straight with people. You don't have to lie. Just be straight. And people will know when you're lying. Just be upfront, lie, and if you have to fight back, you got to fight back. If not, they're going to take you down.
What's next for you? You got the book.
What's next for me?
You mentioned a little while ago, maybe writing a part 2 of the book.
So,
What's next?
Basically, so Vince and I, we're forming a partnership. We're doing townhouses. There's a lot of townhouses out there at $7 million, $9 million. I think there's a lot of value. I'm doing hotel sales. I'm not just doing retail now. I'm pivoting hotels, townhouses, and also, I have to tell you, I have 1,500 business cards that haven't gone into my data bank yet. I got to figure out how to scan them and how to put them on Excel sheets. If anybody knows, they can reach out to me and help me here. But it's just you got to just keep on going, and maybe I'll be in acting now.
But
do voiceovers. Why not?
Listen, anything is possible.
Hugh Grant was sleeping there at the Royal Box at Wimbledon. I could do a better job than that, though.
Listen, reinvention. This is what we talk about.
For sure,
this is what the book is about, and this is what I've sort of done. Throughout my whole life, I started out wanting to be an actor or a model or whatever else, and look at me today, not. So you never know what tomorrow brings.
Yeah,
but. There's got to be one thing in the 1 minute that we have left. There's got to be one thing that stands out in your entire career, back to the watch salesman days, to your commercial real estate, enormous success. One thing that you think about more often than not that stands out that you say, I'm glad I did that, or I'm glad I was part of that. What might
I want to
be?
tell you something. I was such a good partner with Faith Consolo. And I don't know where this came from. One day she looks at me, we're having the meal. She goes, we're really close. I said, yeah. She said, if you ever murdered somebody,
dear.
I'd cover for you.
Oh, dear.
But
That's a
anyway,
partnership for you.
but on my wife's side, she's so honest. If they ever came for me, she'd say, third door on the right. But let me ask you, we have 1 minute left. Since I don't see this golden umbrella that you're talking about, what do you see that maybe I should be doing in that 1 minute?
Honestly,
Yeah.
probably just about anything you put your mind to do. Again, we mentioned the word reinvention, over and over again in this conversation.
Right.
And I learned from a young guy that you go to school, you graduate college, you want to be the president of a firm, and you quickly realize, well, you can't do that. You got to start at the bottom and
Right.
kind of climb up. And so you reinvent yourself all the time. At your age, at my age, I don't think anybody can stop us if we put our mind to something. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's entertainment, as you said before. Maybe it's back
Let me
really
ask you a
full time
question.
in commercial real estate. It could be anything.
I sing. If you sing, we can do a
Sadly,
road show.
my brothers do, but I do not. I don't
I'm a
have musical
baritone.
talent. I cannot play guitar, and I cannot sing. With that, we're coming right back with my final thoughts for the week, so don't go anywhere.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
All right, everybody, we are back with my final thoughts. So Joe Aquino's Memoirs of a Watch Salesman, a New York City real estate story, is more than a personal story. It's a mirror held up to New York City itself. Gritty, electric, brutally honest, and undeniably human. His journey reminds us that success isn't always polished. Sometimes it's messy, complicated, and fought for inch by inch. Through each chapter of his life, from starting out hustling on the street to high-end real estate, from betrayal to rebirth, Joe shows us the true cost of ambition and the strength it takes to rebuild when everything falls apart. This conversation leaves us with a powerful message. Reinvention is always possible, but only if you're brave enough to tell the truth, own your past, and keep moving forward. For anyone who's ever chased a dream, lost their footing, or dared to start again, this story is for you. So thank you, Joe. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Substack, or TikTok at Vince Rocco. And Norman Vincent Peale said, shoot for the moon, everyone. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. Keep thinking the good thoughts. Buy the book, Memoirs of a Watch Salesman, a New York City real estate story. And I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.